and let us all do we can to build a better future. So, censorship, it's very real, and corporate media is aware about it. I think we're all seeing it firsthand. Independent media is at risk, and we have to look at alternative platforms. Look, we've dealt with it on Facebook in the early days of hard lens media. Twitter, it's a breeding ground of censorship. YouTube, we've dealt with it so many times, it's starting to get ridiculous.
We've dealt with it so many times. I literally just created, and I run a meetup group for YouTubers and such. I literally just created an event for this Sunday on dealing with censorship. We deal with it so much.
Yeah, it's madness. And look, shout out to Case Study QB who managed to find this video and upload onto his Twitter account. Be sure to follow Case Study QB. He's doing a lot of fantastic work. Here we have some pundits talking about how they can censor social media. Let's play this first video.
Possible. I mean, the landscape of misinformation is so vast. Is it possible to actually stop the proliferation of misinformation on the internet? And what role does Facebook play at this point in time?
There's a couple challenges. One, no one imagined what it would be like for everybody to be their own printing press. And that's essentially what people have the ability to do right now. They can make content faster than anybody could police it. The second dimension of this is no one is in agreement about what should be policed. If you went to Capitol Hill today, one political persuasion would want one thing policed, the other would say that it's free speech and vice versa, and that changes over time. It's very dynamic. A third sort of aspect of this is what is misinformation or disinformation really comes down to where you evaluate people's opinions versus the news. And that is very unclear in the social media space. Who is a journalist, who is a news producer versus who is stating their opinion. I think the last sort of thing to think about is it can be stopped or taken down much more aggressively. And that's by focusing on the most prolific offenders. Usually it is a small cadre that produces the largest volume of misinformation and disinformation. And the earlier you do it, the better, because it stems it over time. So if you want to get away from billions of views, you need to stop it very early on. And that's probably where Facebook could have done better.
Nick, I sort of wonder from a layman's perspective, and it is a blunt metaphor, but whether this is not whack-a-mole. I mean, when you hear about users being kicked off Facebook, they find another platform to organize on and spread misinformation. If it's not Parler, like it's something else. To what degree can you stop the mushrooming of sites that will accommodate misinformation?
Well, so one thing I think to remember about Facebook is it is whack-a-mole on Facebook, but Facebook has also had mole food in its algorithm for the last 10 years. So the most important thing for Facebook to do is to remove the mole food, to make it not as profitable, to make it not as beneficial, to put outlandish material that activates the sort of hyper-partisan misinformation types of our brain. So that's part of it. The central thing that Facebook needs to do is to reckon with its algorithm and the ecosystem it created.
Okay, first, before we play the next video, because it's somewhat related to this, and it's kind of hilarious to see a Fox News brains melt about it.
But really quickly,
super quick. Go ahead.
It sounds like a viewpoint of someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about, but overheard someone else talk about it, is now doing a report based on what they overheard to people who have no idea what's going on.
So, again, I want to just read one person's chat. Shout out to Sweet Lou. You are absolutely correct. MSDNC is revolting, and it is disgusting because here they are talking about how can we stop people from speaking out or covering news or becoming their own independent media outlet. Now, we've dealt with the Facebook and YouTube censorship firsthand, so have our numerous colleagues in the independent media circle as well. But this should concern a lot of people because here they are saying not only should we censor Facebook, Twitter, and do a whole whack-a-mole game, they're saying, well, let's stop the mole food. First, buddy, obviously you've never been out of the country. Mole food. I mean, you're talking about bait. Moles are underground creatures that like to eat, underground animals, like worms or other small insects, right? I mean, here we are having a science lesson with this dude, but what is he talking about mole food? You're talking about consumers. You're talking about people who follow an algorithm. So basically, you're calling people fucking. Well, I almost swore there. You're calling us freaking mole food?
No, it's even funnier because he's using a metaphor because he doesn't even know what he's talking about. Because again, the way that I judge whether or not you know what you're talking about is if you can describe it to a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old would have no idea what you mean if you talked about it this way.
Yeah.
Mole food, I think maybe what he means is that Facebook segments people into algorithmic groups so they can better sell ads. And that is what's causing echo chambers to develop at a higher rate. Although, if that wasn't the case, he would probably be arguing, why are all these conservative people in my feed?
Yeah. A couple of things here, too. And this should concern a lot of people, but how they're saying, well, how do we stop anything else that might challenge the traditional social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube? Because now they're saying, oh, no, what about alternative sites? So that means the corporate media wants to have its narrative. It wasn't too long ago when corporate media mocked Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And ever since the pandemic, they really moved in. And ever since the January 6th riots that happened, we, especially Democratic lawmakers, were in a super fast rush to censor, deplatform, demonetize, and remove people that went against the neoliberal narrative that we see on corporate media or from the two-party system that's in Washington, D.C. This censorship will impact a lot of people. And I always said this, that everyone's on the chopping block. If we embrace this censorship and don't push back against it, it's a real nightmare. That's why I was against AJ being deplatformed. Yeah, he said a lot of horrible things. Same thing with Trump as well. He should not have been taken off Twitter because guess what? His followers are going to follow him. They didn't disappear overnight. And by creating these echo chambers, you're making the problem worse. But after they went after the conservatives, especially big tech and the politicians and the neoliberal marching band, well, guess what? Progressives and independents and third parties were up next. We saw it in 2016. We saw it in 2018. We saw it even now. And it's going to get worse. That's why we have to look at alternative platforms like Panquake, like Odyssey, like Rockfin, whatever else is out there, because it's quite clear that Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram are embracing the corporate media narrative, trying to silence people from speaking out. But we can never forget that it was corporate media that ran the whole idea that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It was corporate media that embraced Russiagate. Corporate media that kept on spewing all these lies. And, I'm just bringing up two examples. Corporate media has done a whole bunch of misleading stories.
Remember that Iraq war? Remember when they were all like, hey, there's not a lot of information now that we've looked into it a little bit. Oh, no, wait, they just carbon copied what the military told them.
Oh, and let's not forget, too, on how corporate media was saying that there were too. Yeah. Oh, wait, that didn't happen. Now, is there anyone saying that corporate media should be demonetized, deplatformed, censored?
No,
because
they should get higher CPMs than everyone else and all of our suggested content.
And not to mention steal videos like from Ford Fisher or the Convo Couch and say, we're going to use their footage, but censor these. And again, look, we got to be very concerned about this because corporate media is trying to silence not only independent media, they're trying to silence you. But speaking of which, there's a weird...
Not even they're trying to silence you. That's part of it. It's trying to silence their growing competition business model continues to just collapse.
But now I want to acknowledge this story too because it's related to Trump being deplatformed from Twitter. And that's related a little bit to this first video as well with censorship, and that is Fox News' brain is melting after Bernie Sanders has said that he wasn't really on board with Trump being deplatformed. What's going on? Let's play this video. Again, shout out to Case Study QB. Be sure to follow him on Twitter. Does a lot of great work. Let's play that video, Faze.
Out big tech and its dominance. Senator Bernie Sanders speaking out against former President Trump's Twitter ban yesterday. The Vermont senator telling the New York Times he did not like a handful of high-tech people having so much power. Angela, it's interesting to hear Bernie Sanders say this, come to the defense of President Trump's and the Twitter ban. A lot of people felt this way, but hearing a leading Democrat say it is also quite interesting. Your reaction?
It's a relief to hear a Democrat and a Democratic socialist at that actually come out and support free speech. Now, Twitter's a private company. It can do what they want. But I think there's something very deeply American at the core about saying, I don't like this guy. I think he's terrible. And I think he should have the right to speak freely. Defending speech you don't like is a solid commitment to American values.
Yep. Bob?
Yeah, I would say not interesting, but shocking that Senator Sanders would come out and support former President Trump to be returned to Twitter. I think that you made some good points. To single out an individual I think just is counter to anything we've learned in this country about free speech and the right to voice your opinion. You may not agree with it, but you certainly should have your right to do that. So I hope that in fact he is allowed back on Twitter, and that we don't have that this kind of control by a handful of people that we just mentioned.
I mean, in so many words, I'm wondering if this tells us that Bernie Sanders is going to be there with a vote to roll back Section 230 or to support an antitrust suit against the dominance that we're seeing from big tech.
Yeah. It's very possible. It's very possible, Maria, that, again, it would be shocking, but encouraging, right?
Okay, so Fox News was having a little, crisis there. Oh, well, wait, we're supposed to hate Bernie. Now he's defending Trump.
But he's a socialist.
But he's
They
a
made sure to
socialist,
get
but
that
he's
in there.
defending Trump. So again, who knows how Bernie Sanders is going to vote with all of this? But there's a bigger picture here, and that is there is talk on corporate media as well as in Washington D.C. about the future of independent media on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, and now more than ever, we need to have a true active populace to not only protect independent media and free speech, but for future generations. Like, this is something that's going to impact all of us. And here you have MSNBC saying, well, how can we censor? And then you have Fox News having its little crisis, its mental breakdown, where you're saying, well, Bernie's defending Trump. See, the thing is, I am for free speech, and all of us should be for it, because as soon as you start silencing one group, as soon as you start deplatforming or deeming who is in charge or who is allowed to speak and who is not, pretty soon we're all on that chopping block, which is why we have to protect whistleblowers, which is why we need to have independent media, which is why corporate media should be broken up. The monopoly that they have must no longer stand. And this ridiculous favoritism that they get from YouTube, specifically with YouTube, needs to end. Because it was independent media that's been leading the way. It's independent media that's on the ground. It's independent media that's covering stories that corporate media doesn't even have the courage to even talk about anymore. The real idea right now is that they're afraid of their competition. They know they're weak. They know they're completely out of touch. And if we are going to truly have a true free press that's going to hold the powerful accountable, we need to speak out against this. We need to speak out against this super fast rush of censorship, and we need to call out corporate media for its hypocrisy and them promoting this idea. So I brought the Fox News segment because I think it's important to show that, look, maybe there's potential where Bernie Sanders might do the right thing. I mean, I think we've all been disappointed with Sanders and some of his recent decisions, but free speech, Sanders, you're going to want to put your effort into this one. Again, Daniel.
Yeah, so I think it's really funny that that they were having such an issue with this, where they should, if they were right on their own points, which they're not. They're not consistent themselves on this. Should have been a bit more supportive and saying, yes, Bernie Sanders is calling this, where we have Democrats, blah, 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 but they had to make sure they hit those jabs because that's their thing. It's also really funny to watch Fox News say it's so sad that there's so many dominant narratives or dominant companies controlling the media so much when they are a dominant company controlling the media so much. It's sort of just funny. We have 6 companies that control 92% of all media. And although I'm happy that we're having a discussion finally about what is Google's state in things, what is Facebook's state in things, why are we not having a conversation about, because we've talked before, it's actually harder to break up a monopoly like Google, because most of us only use the best search engine, which for a lot of cases is Google. And so that's why most people use Google. It's not because Google has a wonderful logo or they have those custom day things. It's that it's the search engine that gets the most things, and that's partially due to their spying and all the stuff that we don't like. But it's the same reason why Google Maps is used and Apple Maps aren't. So there's that point. And so even if you break these guys up into, you can't break up 2 map companies. You just have to extract map. You have to extract Instagram. But then you still have a conglomerate of Facebook. However, you can break up big news. You can easily break it up. They're just consolidations of smaller news. There used to be, before Bill Clinton started his presidency, thousands of news companies, whether that be small local stations or for television, radio, newspaper, magazines, you name it. It's now basically 6. So if we're going to be talking about breaking these companies up, good. I would like to not be at the boot heel of YouTube, but I wouldn't like to compete with someone who controls 20% of the media market just as much.
Yeah. And again, when this story is going to keep on developing, and people need to be very well aware that we could be deplatformed like that. March 4th is when we got that suspension. YouTube made a mistake, and thankfully all of you, our viewers and subscribers, really stepped up and saved us. Shout out to all of our fellow colleagues in independent media that had me on their show when I was trying to plead our case. Like, hey, look, YouTube, you suspended us. You gave us a suspension over a false claim.
Months ago.
2 months ago, basically, at this point. So, and then when we were shadow banned between March of 2020 up to September of 2020.
Imagine where we would be if none of that had happened, especially the shadow ban. If you followed our trajectory, we might be around 100,000 subs by now.
We could have been. And
also, check this out. You might find that interesting.
Let's see. And shout out to Judas Andre. Kit Rebel News was taken down. On YouTube, 1.45 million subscribers. Oh my goodness. Well,
this is why we've talked. We're sort of not fully ready to talk.
All right, I'm not fully.
This is why we're building our own infrastructure.
All right.
YouTube.
So to our viewers, I'm going to look more into that story. What's happening was that I was not well aware of what happened to that channel, and I was not aware of just how large your channel was. But if the censorship doesn't frighten you now, I don't know what will. But this is very real for us because again, 1.45 million subscribers. That's a lot,
and it's crazy that we were one of the only news channels that got a strike revoked, and it was thanks to you guys. But I think on top of this, and going back to what the point of this is, which is talking about free speech, I want to remind everyone it's really easy to say that people that agree with you should have free speech. It's much more principled to say people that you just despise what they're saying should also have free speech, because if you do that, you are now on the moral high ground if they decide to not do that to you.
Yeah. Protect free speech. I'm for it. And look, are there bad people out there that use social media in a horrifying way for conspiracy theories or hate speech? Yeah, there are those kind of people out there. However, I believe that the world is filled with good people, and good people will step up. And we need to have an independent media now more than ever. Daniel, what's your final note?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's an interesting time that we live in, but if you look at all this, and I think that all of this, everything that we're going through, you should always look through the lens of history, because you will always find that the time that you're in is not too dissimilar from the past.
Yeah.
And this happened, what we're going through happened literally 100 years ago. In the 1920s, when yellow journalism was amok. It was basically what we have now. And to Fox News and all these media companies that have made it a pet issue because it's their competition, let's be real, that we need to really shut down on misinformation. My response is going to be the same response that Kit gives, the same response that many of us give. If you want to combat disinformation, you have to be more trustworthy than it and have the right information. And the problem that mainstream is running into that they just will not accept is the reason people trust disinformation is because mainstream media earned people's distrust.
Yep. One other thing here, too, before we end this segment, because, again, this is something that impacts Hardlens Media specifically, as well as some of our fellow colleagues. Look, the censorship is very real, so be sure to subscribe to us on Odyssey and subscribe to us on Rockfin. Those links are available in all of our videos, so be sure to check them out and help us out, because we are going to have to keep on pushing forward because it's very real, and we need to protect free speech now more than ever.